Most states are falling far short when it comes to funding programs that prevent kids from starting to smoke and help adults to quit. Let's break down where Georgia ranks, in fact, and what this means for public health with Brian King joining us this morning, Executive Vice President of Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. All right, Brian, glad to have you here. So let's talk about Georgia. How bad and how serious is this at a state level right now?
So things are particularly dire in Georgia. This report shows that most states are not meeting the CDC recommended levels, but Georgia actually ranks 49th, spending only about 2% of what CDC recommends based on the evidence and science to effectively prevent and reduce tobacco use.
All right, so we know the tobacco settlement money that a lot of us heard about, it was meant to prevent addiction. Where did most of that money go?
That money is going to a variety of other things, including filling potholes and not things related to public health. If those dollars were expended for public health, including tobacco prevention and control, we could see sizable increases in extra funds. Nationally, it would be around $6 billion. Implementing these evidence-based strategies that we know work with effective dollars could be very useful at reducing tobacco-related disease and death. Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about Georgia again, more specifically. Not good news that we rank right near the bottom. In fact, just 2% of what the CDC is actually recommending. So what does that mean and the work that we still have to do here in Georgia?
Well, tobacco use remains the leading cause of preventable disease and death in this country, and that includes in Georgia. And tobacco use continues to kill nearly 490,000 Americans every year. And so we know what the problem is, but we also know what works. And one of the most effective strategies to help reduce cigarette smoking is increasing the price of the products. And so just for an example, in Georgia, increasing the tax on a pack of cigarettes to $1.50 would prevent 5,400 kids from smoking, prompt nearly 30,000 adults to quit, and even raise over $300 million in revenue in the first year alone.
All right, Brian, our lawmakers just went back in session here just a couple of weeks ago. This is not necessarily one of the hot topics right now, but what's one of the biggest changes that our lawmakers could make right now to really see a difference?
It ultimately comes down to implementing those strategies we know work and following the science. And as I said, increasing price is the single most effective interventions to reduce consumption. It's no surprise and coincidence that the states with the highest taxes on these products have the lowest levels of use. And in that being said, Georgia has a profound opportunity to increase that cigarette tax, and in turn would see sizable increases in not only benefits to health, but also additional revenue that they could allocate to public health and help further fund and reduce this completely preventable health risk.
Emergency rooms see a sharp spike in cold-related injuries this time of year. We're talking frostbite, hypothermia, to even serious falls and heart issues. Let's break down the hidden health risk of extreme cold and what you need to know right now to protect yourself and your family with Dr. Andrew Thornton from Wellstar Urgent Care. Dr. Thornton, what is the biggest cold weather health myth that people still actually believe?
Well, I think the biggest myth is that flu and COVID are going to be our biggest risks this time of year. But in reality, when we start to see ice and precipitation, falls are actually going to be more dangerous. We see a lot of falls this time of year because people underestimate ice, and that can be with driving or simply walking. So I think it's very important to take very seriously the presence of ice and the fact that a fall can be devastating. And also, I think people underestimate the fact that it can be hard to get to a doctor when we have weather challenges. So some patients will let injuries go when normally they would have gone to seek medical help. So it's very important to just not put yourself in a position where you could suffer a fall, and really watching for ice, not being outdoors unless you absolutely have to, especially patients who are already at risk for falls, patients who have mobility issues, patients who may be on high-risk medications like blood thinners. They can suffer catastrophic head injuries and broken bones from falls on the ice.
Yeah, but why do you think cold weather strains the body more than people actually expect?
Well, our body does work harder in the cold just to breathe and exert ourselves. So sometimes we'll see patients who don't realize that they're actually putting more stress on their heart and requiring more oxygen of their body than normal during cold weather. And so they may be trying to shovel snow or do things that require a lot of exertion they wouldn't normally do. It can put stress on the heart, and we actually see more heart attacks this time of year. We also see more heart attacks in association with illness. So for example, flu and pneumonia, we know actually put stress on the heart as well. The lungs actually take a lot of stress in the cold. People with asthma tend to get asthma exacerbations this time of year. They'll get spasms of their airways, and at a time when we already see a lot of infections going around, that's a big risk as well, as just breathing trouble in patients with asthma.
So if someone starts to feel, let's say, numb, a little bit dizzy, or even confused, what's the first move, and how do you know if you need to go to urgent care versus just calling 911 to figure it out?
Well, some things to think about with those symptoms. You mentioned earlier carbon monoxide, and I think that's worth reiterating. This time of year, we don't just have outdoor dangers, we have indoor dangers. So any gas appliances or indoor generators, like you mentioned, that should not be indoors or within 20 feet of the home, carbon monoxide poisoning can look just like the flu. You can get headache and dizziness and nausea. That can end up becoming confusion, passing out, even chest pain. It's very, very important to seek medical care if you have any of those symptoms. It's very important to have carbon monoxide detectors in your home on every level, especially near bedrooms, and just be aware that those symptoms can occur and that those are potentially fatal if you have any of those appliances in your home. And also frostbite, we do see frostbite this time of year, places on the face, especially the nose, the ears, the chin, the cheeks, as well as the fingers and toes. When they're exposed to cold weather, especially getting freezing temperatures, 32 degrees Fahrenheit and less, numbness is often the first symptom, and then color change, white or even blue.
We want to turn now to a friend of the 11 Alive Streaming Center, Caitlin Ross, back again with some good news for us, I think.
I do have some good news.
That's something you always bring us.
You know, I really like this title now, Friend of the Stream.
You're a very
t-shirt.
a good friend of the stream. You keep coming back. We'll get that t-shirt for you.
Amazing. Yes, I would love to share some good news with you.
Please, the floor is yours.
So I was thinking, as we were all talking doom and gloom and sadness and ice and freezing cold, what can we do to warm it up a little bit? And I think we should start talking a little bit about the people who went the extra mile during this storm, who are really making life better for folks who are a little bit scared during severe weather, feel alone, feel like they might get left behind. And there were so many of them here in Georgia. And you have to start with the linemen and women who are out there working so hard. A lineman in Alpharetta shared a picture of his hard hat. Check that out.
Wow, look at that.
That is completely iced over hard hat. And that's because of the conditions that they're working in. Check this out. That is a viewer video sent in from Rabun County of linemen and women on the frozen lines. I mean, that looks 40 feet up in the air there.
And frigid.
Right?
Goodness, look at that.
Just absolutely freezing cold. And they're out there hour after hour, day after day, getting the power back on for people who really, really need it. And so my first hero of the storm goes to the linemen who are working tirelessly to make sure that we have our power back.
Let's pause and keep this image up, because I think, I know it's perfect. I've certainly been guilty of this a time or two as well. But when you're at home and you're without power and you're thinking, oh my goodness, what are they doing out there? Why can't they get it fixed? That's what they're doing.
Right?
And they're doing something that 99% of folks would not be doing. They're up there climbing around on pretty treacherous territory there, and they're doing it just so we can flip that switch and get the power back on.
Get the power back on.
So maybe a little more patience
I know.
could be exercised.
It is hard to have patience when you are freezing cold and tired, but I give them a lot of credit. They've been out there in this through the entire thing. And another guy who has been up all night, all day through this entire thing, my buddy Benji. He is 16 years old and a ham radio operator. So going into the storm, nobody knew if we were going to lose power, lose communication altogether. So Benji was up all night long waiting on the other side of that radio to make sure that he could respond if there were mass communication outages. Ham radios connect you in an emergency, and he's only 16 years old, but he got trained to do this because he wants to make sure that he can help keep people safe.
Anytime we go through or have the potential for going through something challenging in our state, I think it's something that makes Georgia so special. People show up, and there is no age limit on who can do it. You see a 16-year-old
Right?
using some technology that is much older than 16 years.
Yes, he was really interested in learning how to build the systems, which I also think is really cool. He has an engineering mind, but he clearly has a really big heart. And one of my favorite parts about Benji is he does this. He stays up all night and he answers these calls from strangers. And right by his side, his sidekick, a bunny named Buns.
No, come on. That's.
Yes.
Do we have an
I
image?
gotta
Do we
get
have video
okay.
of
I will
Buns?
get
Buns is his name.
the bunny's name is Buns.
Incredible.
And Buns is his sidekick, and Buns stays up all night long with Benji.
I'm scouring the video that we're looking at here.
I-
I wish
I really missed this.
Next time you're back,
no,
you've
I will
gotta track
find it.
down.
If you can talk about something for 3 minutes, I will find it on his mom's Facebook page.
That brings me something that I do want to ask you about too, because one of the reasons you are such a friend of this program is because you have an incredible network of people all across the state that you are always in constant communication with. And when you're talking about the news, it is our job to bring you up to speed on the things happening, and sometimes that's serious stuff. But you can't lose sight of all the good that is happening,
Right.
and you get such a front row seat to this every day, and you bring it to us.
I am so grateful for that. I really, really am. I love that when people have good news, they think to send it to me, and then I have the awesome opportunity to share it with you. And so I'm super, super glad to do that. And another good one I have that I want to share with you.
Please.
Is about the workers at Lifeline. Check out that cat.
Wow.
So during the storm, they didn't know how bad it was going to get. So the staff at Lifeline animal shelters rolled out their sleeping bags, they put on their PJs, and they stayed overnight with the cats
At
and
the
the
shelter.
dogs through the storm. Yes.
How, oh, I have so many questions about this. How loud was it in there? I bet is maybe the first one.
Cannot begin to imagine how you would get even the tiniest bit of sleep, sleeping with, I mean, they've got dozens and dozens of animals in there.
But boy, you know what? I bet who got more rest than they would have otherwise is those animals in there.
Yes.
Whenever storms come in, the animals really get spooked. It is frightening for them.
It is. And knowing that the roads were going to be bad and there would be a possibility they couldn't get there, it was these workers took it upon themselves. They said, hey, let's roll out the sleeping bags. And I love that they're working there with like the cats in their arms and the dogs in their arms. So
Did you get a chance to ask anybody, or did they tell you, what got them to the point where they said, you know what, guys, we all got to do this. We all got to go in together.
I think it became a movement after one person raised their hand. They were like, you know what, that actually sounds kind of fun. And Lifeline set them up pretty good. Like they have a huge TV. The guys brought their gaming systems in. Like they made a fun night out of it. But they kept the animals safe in the process, which I think is really cool.
It is very, very cool. And it brings to light, too, all the work that the shelters are doing, something I know you have also done a lot of work with. They are constantly facing the challenge of taking care of those animals, avoiding overcrowding, and making sure that you talk about the least of these, these animals that are strays are in so many ways easily overlooked. And there are people doing a lot of hard work to make sure that isn't the case.
Yes, and what I thought was so cool were all of the people who stepped up to foster animals during the storm. So these workers stayed overnight, but 94 people in Atlanta came to foster animals through the storm. So we called them the Snuggle Buddies. Like they went and picked up a Snuggle Buddy. And so that's a lot of animals that got out of the shelter, even for only a weekend, but they got to, lounge around on the couch, keep people warm. It's just such a sweet program that really helps.
And it definitely makes a big difference for those animals, too. I mean, if you walk in to the kennel, it's I know that they're well taken care of, but it feels sometimes like doggy jail a little bit,
Yes.
because you walk in and they're all barking, they're excited because
know.
I think I've never, I haven't talked to them, but I think if they could talk, they would express they have some sense that this person who's visiting is my chance to get out of here.
Yes.
And even if you're just being fostered, what a difference that makes for those animals to be socialized, to get some experience out of the kennel that maybe sets them up for adoption permanently down the road.
I know. It is such a sweet thing, and I love that they go the extra mile to help. And I can't resist a mile pun here. I can't, because I met a great rideshare driver who really went all of the extra miles for people who were stranded in the storm. His name is Marcus Johnson, and he worked around the clock to help senior citizens who were scared to drive but needed to either make it home from their hospital appointments or get to medical facilities. This guy is amazing.
I wonder.
I've been to the hospital a few times. I picked a few senior citizens up. So I know I help them get in the car, make sure they get out the car safe, walk them to their door. So
You are a gentleman,
yeah,
sir.
absolutely. Yeah, you got to be. Yeah.
Wow. Caitlin, you meet the best people in our city
do.
and in our state.
I really do, yeah. He was just amazing. He was such a nice guy, and he made it a point. I mean, he got out of the car. We met him standing outside of Waffle House, and he got out of the car to escort the people he was driving into the Waffle House. Like, he really wanted to make sure that people were safe and taken care of.
For a lot of homeowners, the biggest risk right now is just starting. We're talking frozen pipes, ice damage, and hidden leaks can really cause some costly interior water damage, even days after a storm. So joining me this morning is Sarah Dillingham from the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety with what you need to watch out for right now. So Sarah, we just came through the weekend, ice, deep cold here in Metro Atlanta. When do homeowners typically start discovering this interior water damage after a system like this?
Good morning, Aisha. Well, unfortunately, sometimes we start to see these signs of the frozen burst pipes during the storm. When the pressure builds up behind these lines where you have these ice buildup areas happening, they can have immense pressure. And so if those pipes burst, you're going to know that immediately. Some of those might be a little bit more subtle. If it has cracked the pipe where the ice is sitting, it might not start to make itself known until a little bit of thawing occurs. But eventually you're going to know that something has happened in your home. So if during the event you notice that maybe water isn't flowing as freely through those pipes as you'd like, or nothing's coming out at all, there's a good chance that you have a frozen pipe. You immediately want to make sure you shut that faucet off and go to your main water shutoff valve in your home and turn that off, then call a licensed plumber because they're going to have to come out and fix that for you.
So for the people who made it through the storm thinking they're in the clear, what's the first thing you would actually tell them to check today?
What you need to do is go inside and outside your home and just take a look around and check for any areas, especially for water leaks. You want to look at your ceiling or walls, see if there are any unusually wet areas on your walls or any spotting of discoloration on those walls. You could possibly have a leak there. Also, take a look around your home. We did have ice across some parts of your area, so that ice can weigh down those branches and trees. Some of those may have cracked or even broken and be a little bit more obvious. So you want to do that inspection inside your home and outside your home. If something on the outside your home needs addressed, things like trees, you want to call a licensed tree professional and have them come out and take care of that for you. And maybe just do a general inspection just in case there's some hidden damage that you can't see to protect yourself ahead of the next storm or just a random branch falling on your home.
You think people should be worried about, water-related risks tied to power loss?
Yeah, so what we can see when we have extended power outages, which some people are seeing along the path of this storm, those extended power outages can allow the temperatures inside the home to get very cold. And they do what we call, they exceed their plumbing design temperatures. In Atlanta, your plumbing design temperature is around 22 degrees, so as long as your home stays heated, you should be doing okay. But if your power is out for a period of several days, especially those older homes, that heat release in your home can happen pretty quickly. So it may just be a matter of days before those temperatures inside your home are not only uninhabitable, which is around less than 57 degrees or so, but may actually exceed those design temperatures and drop below that 22-degree threshold. So the good thing is a lot of people have kept their power on, but for those that are dealing with those extended power outages, the burst pipe risk gets even higher for those homeowners.
All right, we got about 30 seconds left. What would be one piece of advice you would give people for insuring their homes and property to make sure that they're supported during incidents like this?
Absolutely. Well, know what your insurance policy says and make sure that you have your insurance agent's contact phone number ready to go in the event that you do document some damage and need to file a claim. Keep those documents, receipts from the cleanup process. It's going to help make that process a lot easier for you. And I can't stress enough, do a home inventory before each main season so that you know what is in your home, and that makes the claims process that much easier if you need to file a claim. And be sure to check out our website at ibhs.org/winter ready and other ways that you can get your home prepared for the next storm.
Look at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Beautiful day to fly. Beautiful day to be anywhere but outside, I'll tell you that. It is a chilly morning, and I am happy to be joined by who's quickly becoming a regular of the show, Jonathan Raymond from our digital team. Great to see you.
Good to be in here.
All right, so we got to talk about our airport here.
Yeah.
Because we may have just lost the crown as the world's busiest airport.
So maybe is the answer. You could say it's in dispute.
Okay.
I think a friendly dispute, but Chicago recently put on blast that they have become the busiest airport. And Atlanta, as we all know around here, has long touted itself as the world's busiest airport. So the wedge, if you will, there is that Chicago is claiming this based on FAA data that shows they had more takeoffs and landings, about 50,000 more last year. Atlanta is, for its part, still claiming the crown because they, as of 2024, and here's where it gets a little interesting, as of 2024, they had more people fly through.
Okay.
And this is, this data is not FAA data. This is in a report put out by the Airports Council International. Okay. Atlanta, in a statement yesterday, called that the gold standard. That is the true standard for how you judge a busy airport. I will not tell the viewers how they decide what constitutes a busy airport, but so that's where the line is. On one side of the line, you have Chicago saying we had more flights, and on the other side of the line, you have Atlanta saying we had more passengers. Now, to where this gets, sort of interesting is that the next report is due out in the summer, the Airports Council International report. That will tell us, I guess, who the definitive busiest airport is, because even Chicago, for their part, said that ACI is the global authority on airport data, but they believe, they had a statement, Chicago had a whole press release come out about how they're the busy airport now.
Congrats, Chicago.
They're number one, and they believe the 2025 data will confirm O'Hare as the busiest airport in the world. So they think when this report comes out in the summer, they're going to be the new number one.
We'll be watching. It's kind of like two dads arguing at a cookout, like, I caught a bigger fish. Well, I caught more fish, right?
Yeah,
Isn't it kind of like that?
It's sort of like, if the old way college football champions would be contested.
Yes.
And, it's sort of like Waffle House saying we're the busiest breakfast chain because we serve the most people, but then IHOP says, no, we make the most food. So it's like,
Well, I know which is the preferred breakfast chain in my house between those two. All right, so Chicago's saying we got more flights. Atlanta's saying we got more humans. I think at the end of the day, the people out there watching are just like, I don't care. Can I just get to my gate on time, right?
I think if you had a title that people would prefer, it would be world's fastest airport.
Well, no doubt about that. I love calling it the world's busiest airport. It's been a great crown to have for a while. So can I still call it that in quotation marks?
Based on Chicago's acknowledgement that the ACI rankings are the sort of true standard by which this is awarded.
Yes.
I think Atlanta can legitimately still claim the crown until whenever these rankings come out.
Sometime this summer?
Sometime this summer, allegedly.
In 1986, that the Space Shuttle Challenger cleared the tower and went right there into the sky. A lot of you may remember this, but the failure of a solid rocket booster 73 seconds after launch led to the shuttle being destroyed. 7 people on board lost their lives, including New Hampshire school teacher Christina McAleef. So these two moments serve as powerful reminders of what's at stake in human spaceflight and how much is still being discovered. So let's get some context now with Judd Reddy, Executive Director of Georgia Tech's Space Research Institute. Glad to have you with us this morning. So we just kind of took a look back at those two moments, and when you put those two moments together exactly 40 years apart, what do you think this says about our goal and our aim of reaching for the stars eventually?
Exploration is, Jonathan, first of all, thank you for having me on here. But I would say exploration is just built into the DNA of humans from the various early beginning, many millions of years ago to today, pushing the boundaries of where a human can live, whether it's expanding across cold areas or expanding into the outer space, living on the moon or just in orbit on the International Space Station.
Yeah, and a lot of people look back to 40 years ago today. As we mentioned, Challenger is often described as a turning point in our country's space program. So how do you think that that moment and that tragedy, if you will, changed the public's understanding of the risks involved when it comes to astronauts and what they do, going up into space?
Vividly, I was in middle school at the time. We had the TV rolled in to social studies class. We were watching it live as it happened. I had wanted to be an astronaut since first grade at that point, so I was all into the space shuttle, really interested in it at the time. It was becoming normal for spaceflight. They didn't even show it on the news. Occasionally for a launch, the astronauts themselves no longer wore spacesuits. They just wore like regular jumpsuits. So there was becoming this, that it was not a dangerous aspect, that it was going to be something just like flying a regular commercial airliner. But unfortunately, we learned very much the hard way. That is not the case.
Absolutely. And let's look ahead now to the 4 astronauts flying Artemis 2. What kind of history and how much history do you think they'll be taking with them?
What a wonderful experience. I was just barely 2 years old the last time humans went to the moon. So to have the ability, we all thought we would be having colonies on the moon by now, if you believed all the hype back then. So to be finally back there after all this time, half century into my life at this point, to be able to fly there, we're not landing, we're just testing a variety of different capabilities, but still to be able to visually see the far side of the moon, for instance. Very few humans have done that, only a dozen with their own eyes. We've certainly seen it in pictures. So I think it's great. I think the future of humankind is exploration and settlement and expansion. And the moon's the next logical step, Mars after that, and so on and so forth through the upcoming thousands and thousands of years ahead of us.
Yeah, a lot, still in the pipeline to go. But let's talk before you go. I got about 30 seconds here. When it comes to NASA, how do you think the agency has changed in terms of transparency compared to the shuttle era 40 years ago or so when it came to some of these potential concerns?
I was rereading, just doing the homework before this, to read the lessons learned from the Apollo 1 tragedy, the Challenger tragedy that we're talking about, as well as the Columbia tragedy. All of these happened within a week or so of each other, many decades apart, but they're all like right now, basically. And there's a lot of similarities between them. There's what's called go fever, where there's just, you want to push towards launch, you work so hard, you want to launch. And that comes from astronauts, managers, and engineers along the way.
I want to talk about an Atlanta-based documentary that's out right now, shining light on the power of mentorship, especially for young black boys. And let's check out the website. It's for Rogue Elephants. And it explores what happens when positive male guidance is missing and how lives can change when a community steps in. Joining us this morning is Derike Geuka, director of Rogue Elephants and former president of Emerging 100 of Atlanta. We'll get to that connection in a minute. But Derike, great to see you this morning. Thank you for your time.
Hey, thanks so much, Dan. Really a pleasure to be on. Thanks to everyone at Living Alive for having us to talk about our important work.
Well, you're welcome. Let's talk about that work. The film Rogue Elephants. How did you choose that name, and what do you want folks to know about it?
Yeah, well, I think something that's really interesting is that I'm a former teacher. And when I transitioned from teaching into the law, I really wanted to find a way to give back. And there's an awesome program here in Atlanta called the Emerging 100 of Atlanta that mentors students at APS Best Academy. I was on the phone talking about the mentoring that we were doing with my mom, actually, and she said, wow, it really reminds me of this special that I just saw on the BBC about elephants. And she tells this story about what happens to a group of young teenage elephants when they didn't have a male role model, the destructive behavior they engaged in, and how a group of conservationists introduced male elephants into kind of their family pack, and all of that bad behavior just went away, and these elephants kind of began reforming their behavior. And I thought, wow, that's really similar to the effect that we're seeking to have through our mentoring programs in the Emerging 100 of Atlanta. And we talked with a few of our members, my then current executive board, and also Daryl Humphrey and Rob Owens, who are the executive producer and co-producer. And we came up with the title for our film because we thought it was analogous to the work we were doing here in Atlanta.
When you talk about the absence of male figures, what are some of the real world consequences of that gap? Not when it comes to elephants, but when it comes to humans.
Oh, absolutely. Well, one thing is for sure. I mean, if you think about a household that has 2 incomes, children just have a tremendous advantage, right? Because they got 2 people pouring into the home. That's extra resources. That may be the difference between whether you can pay for an SAT or ACT prep course. That may be the difference between whether you can take that, senior trip to Washington, D.C. or Disney World. It may be, the buffer that happens, a parent suffers a job loss. But then there's also just the diversity of perspective, right? You got 2 lived experiences going into a child's upbringing, making sure that they are able to really see the world through a mature lens. And in a lot of places where there's a high concentration of poverty, you also have a high concentration of single parent led households. So through mentoring, through engagement, through, really trying to bridge and understanding with people from different backgrounds, I think we are coming in and, donating that, positive male perspective in communities where it oftentimes, is kind of under-sourced. And we've seen some amazing outcomes from our students. We've seen them go to Ivy League institutions. We've seen them go and get into entertainment and media. We've seen them get into politics. We've seen them work with a lot of the staple corporations here in Atlanta, and we're really proud of that.
Derique, you have an interesting and unique journey, I would say. You taught middle school kids. You worked in the federal court system, if I'm not mistaken, practicing corporate law now. So you've seen people at a young age. And then you've seen the broader system. How have those experiences shaped your views on mentoring young men so to help them avoid the pitfalls that you've seen?
Absolutely. I mean, I think two things. One, we're all more alike than we are different. And it's hard to hate up close. So when you've been in a classroom with students, and seeing just how precious they are, how wonderful they are, and as a teacher, you have all these high hopes and aspirations that they're going to become, everything they want to be. You go to law school, you exit law school, and you work in the federal court system, and you see so many people facing just deleterious situations. Some of it's, their own doing, but you're like, man, I wish I had been able to help this person before they got to this point in their life and gets derailed. And now that we have an opportunity as mentors to kind of meet at that cross section, there's about 200 or so members in our organization who are really committed to making sure that no children end up in these bad outcome situations, that we have anything to do about it. And we're really trying to promote them to, attend college, to pick up a trade, to do something that they find fulfilling and productive and that's helpful to other people in society as well as themselves. And that's really what it's all about.
For folks who aren't part of a formal mentorship program, they may not be a part of the Emerging 100. What role do we all play as a greater community when it comes to mentoring some of the young men in our neighborhoods?
Absolutely. Well, I think, one thing about Atlanta that's beautiful is I think it's a city that's, too busy to hate, right? So just showing a general amount of kindness when you're out on the street interacting with people is incredibly important. Another thing I think you can do, you hear about philanthropy and you think a donation has to be, some absurd amount of money that, we may not individually possess. But even small donations go a long way for making sure that someone who's food insecure has something to eat, or someone who is homeless may get a care package. So you can make a donation. There's also the Big Brothers Big Sisters is an organization that in the Emerging 100 we look up to a lot. Shout out to Kwame, who's the CEO and president of the organization. He does a lot of good work. Anyone can go become a mentor there and make a really big impact in the life of a child. You can support organizations like the Emerging 100 of Atlanta, the Urban League, other groups. They're doing really important work in the community.
Derique, how can we watch the documentary Rogue Elephants, and what do you hope people take away?
Yeah, so we'll be doing a premiere at Fox Theater on Sunday, February 1st. It'll be invite only for the first premiere, and then we'll be doing a broader release with more details to come. So you can visit the website, sign up to learn more about the documentary Rogue Elephants and the Emerging 100 of Atlanta. And what we want people to take from it is really the importance of community and the importance of not necessarily second chances, but understanding that everyone's journey is unique. People are suffering in ways that, we just don't see when we walk around. We bump into folks in the grocery store, at the movie theater. So extend a little kindness to folks, and hopefully people, extend that same kindness to you. And I think we'll all have a little bit better go at this one shot we got living if we treat each other better.
Joining us now is Lee Morris. He served 8 years as a Fulton County Commissioner, leaving in 2022, and he helped oversee many major policy decisions, including election administration. Welcome, Mr. Morris. Thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here, Rachel.
And Mr. Morris, you're running again to represent District 3. So first, what was your initial reaction when you heard about that FBI raid?
Well, my initial reaction was this is a very serious and disturbing matter. You know, the rule of law in this country has been fundamental since the country was founded. And to use the FBI as a purely political tool here is not what the founding fathers had in mind with the rule of law. It's quite disturbing.
And you were a Fulton County Commissioner during the 2020 election. So take us back. What do you remember about that time and the fallout here in Georgia and specifically in Atlanta from the inside?
Well, the country was becoming more and more divided along political lines, and it's continued ever since. But we thought the election went well in 2020. There were always some snafus, little ones, but it's clear from the recounts and the audits that the election was not stolen. This is old history, and we need to put this history behind us.
And when folks hear about an FBI raid, I think for many it signals there was wrongdoing or criminal activity involved. So, Mr. Morris, does a raid like this automatically mean something was wrong with the election?
Well, I think this was a political move, Rachel. I don't think it's really a serious criminal search, but I understand that it was a criminal search warrant and not a civil search warrant. But no, it doesn't mean necessarily that a crime was committed. I don't think there was a crime that was committed. I think the elections, again, were fair. There are always minor little snafus in any election anywhere, big county, small county, any state. But this one was fair. The recounts and audits showed that over and over again. So I think it's purely a political matter. And the question is why? Is it an attempt to prove that the election was stolen somehow? Is it an attempt to stir up tensions and confusion leading up to the midterms? Is it some effort to deflect some of the things that are going on in the country in Minnesota and elsewhere with ICE? It's hard to tell what the motivation is, but I really honestly do not believe it's a serious attempt to find any criminal activity.
So what do you think the response should be from our local officials right now, from our elections officials to protect the independence of elections here in Georgia?
Well, it's a great question. I think everybody, whether they're elected officials or citizens, ought to be concerned about this and ought to be interested in speaking up and resisting this kind of effort. That's one thing. The other thing that maybe the county needs to do is engage some good, strong criminal defense lawyers. And I've passed a name on to the county that came to me from somebody who may be interested in doing this pro bono. So I hope that the county's going to be doing that, and maybe some of the state elected officials ought to be involved in trying to do the same thing.
And I want to end by asking what you think is next and how you think this could impact future elections here in Fulton County and Georgia as a whole.
Well, I hope this one just ends with a whimper, and that we don't have activities by the FBI and other law enforcement agencies to try to interfere and engage in our elections, because the right to vote is just precious and fundamental, and we need to protect our democracy.
Thank you on a busy morning for helping lend some analysis here. What's your take on that FBI raid yesterday in Fulton County?
Well, number one, be careful what you ask for. What we're in for is the law of unintended consequences. When Fani started this entire situation, she went after the ex-president Trump, who has now become the current president. And his philosophy always seems to be, don't get mad, get even. So the FBI yesterday executed a search warrant in the Fulton County elections to see these ballots, to see what is going on. And they confiscated a lot of stuff. We don't know what they did yet. It hasn't been available to us. We don't know where it's going to go. What we do know wherever it goes, if anywhere, is now in the federal system. It is no longer in the state system. And the district attorney of Fulton County, Fonnie Willis, has no control. She is now an onlooker and a watcher.
So do you think this is in response to DA Willis's investigation or in a response to the lost 2020 election?
I think it's tangentially part of each. Trump didn't believe he should have been prosecuted. I don't go anywhere there. But he was prosecuted, and apparently he spent a lot of money. He's asking for $6.2 million in attorney's fees. Is that fair, unfair? I don't know, none of my business. But what I do know, pardon me, is that Trump was in harm's way. He was in the sight of the rifle, the legal rifle, and he had to go through a great deal of legal maneuvering in order to get where it's getting. Having said that, again, the law of unintended consequences, this took place, started by the district attorney's office in Fulton County. It's out of their hands. Where it's going to go, no one knows until we see what the results of the raid that was executed yesterday. It could go nowhere. This could be much ado, as Shakespeare would say, much ado about nothing, or it could be the continuing end or not end of a never-ending story.
Daryl, President Trump actually hinted at this last week when he was speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. I want to take a listen to that sound real quick from the president.
Have never started, and it wouldn't have started if the 2020 U.S. presidential election weren't rigged. It was a rigged election. Everybody now knows that. They found out. People will soon be prosecuted for what they did. It's probably breaking news, but it should be. It's a rigged election.
You heard the president there saying people will soon be prosecuted for what they did. Who could he be speaking about in Georgia?
Well, he could be speaking about the elections department. He could be speaking about the people who promulgated the charges against him. He could be talking, theoretically, about the district attorney of Fulton County. He could be talking about any of the underlings. But what he says is not always accurate. It's certainly designed to get headlines, and headlines it gets. But what he says and what the evidence shows, we don't know yet, if anything. And remember, it's been not a week, a month, a year. It's been almost 6 years since all of this took place. And we don't know about the chain of custody about the ballots. Where have they been? How long have they been there? Has anyone been able to get into them, see them, do something with them or not? All of that plays a part in what we're looking at. And quite frankly, it's a case of first impression. We've never been there. I hope we never have to go there again, but we are there.
Yeah, an unprecedented case, no doubt about that. You mentioned chain of custody, Daryl, and so did Democratic State Senator Josh McLaurin yesterday. He was outside of that raid when he spoke to us, and I want you to listen to what he said about chain of custody worries.
I've also heard from Fulton officials that there is no protection for chain of custody. There is no assurance that chain of custody is being preserved. That's so important because if they are able to modify the contents of these boxes, when I say they, I mean the Trump administration, then there's really no way of knowing what did happen in 2020.
So the state senator there saying he's worried that the ballot boxes could potentially be modified. Daryl, based on what you know about chain of custody and handling of evidence, is that a legitimate concern at the federal level?
It is and it isn't. Quite frankly, once the FBI is involved, they are as professional and good as it gets. So once they're involved, once they go execute the search warrant and they take whatever they take, they're not going to manipulate it and add ballots or delete ballots. What they're going to do is keep it safe, keep it in a place where no one can go and touch it, no one can maneuver it without a lot of eyes on him or her. My worry about chain of custody is not from yesterday until going forward. My concern with chain of custody would have been from 2020 to now. What, if anything, has happened to those ballots? What, if anything, has anyone done? Have they deleted some or some missing? That's my concern, not from yesterday forward.
Gotcha. You know, this is an issue, the 2020 election, that has been litigated in the past. Georgia Republicans have even stood behind the integrity of that election, and the courts have upheld that there was not widespread fraud. With that in mind, are you surprised that a judge signed off on this warrant?
No, I'm not, because keep in mind, it's very difficult to say to the president, whoever the president may be, the answer is no, and it's spelled N-O, not K-N-O-W. So no, a search warrant merely means I'm going in to look for what I believe to be evidence in a case, and it doesn't mean that there is evidence, good or bad. It just means that it's okay for law enforcement, in this case the FBI, to go in and remove the contents of what they believe are part of the case. So no, a judge signing off of it, I think the magistrate, the judicial officer, the judge, whoever signs off on a search warrant is doing it based upon the affidavit, which must go with the search warrant.
Daryl, my final question to you: How should Georgians be thinking about this? You mentioned just the sensitivity of what was taken yesterday during this raid. How should Georgians be thinking about, the safety of their vote moving forward?
I think that all of us who live in Georgia will say, I like the way it's going on. I don't like what's happened. I don't like the never-ending story, but I'm not worried about the integrity of my vote. It is protected. And quite frankly, if there's a few votes that are irregular, a few votes that went one way or the other, that happens. But overwhelmingly, I think Georgians are going to be very comfortable that their vote, Republican, Democrat, Independent, is going to be safeguarded in a proper and appropriate way.